All right, welcome back to another episode of my Imperial Struggle playthrough. You'll notice that we're at a different location. Got an upgraded table, not necessarily in size, but in looks. You can enjoy this beautiful marble from now on, or for the foreseeable future. So this is going to be turn 4 and the 7 Years' War, ending the Empire era. And of course, last turn we saw a big shift in India for the British, and someone commented, and I should look up who that is to give them credit because they're due for that. Yeah, Scott Beale. He commented and said that the French should have given up 3 victory points instead of conceding both of these locations in India. So doing 2 of them would have been very expensive, but especially seeing as how they have 26 victory points already, giving up 3 to keep their foothold in India would have been a good idea. And that was backed up by Kenneth Knott, who commented that he always forgets about that option, but apparently it's crucial for defensive play. And I also forget about that option. But I'm going to leave it mostly because I'm no good at games, so this will give you a good example of what it would be like to play against me. But if I wanted to put some logic into it, they're at 26 victory points, 4 away from a win. And if things go well during the 7 Years' War, because I'm not using any of I'm not making this decision knowing what the next global demands or anything are, but just looking at the 7 Years' War, there's an opportunity to win that and possibly end the game. Whereas if you lose the 3 victory points, it looks like you're probably going to be playing for an end-game situation. So they're going to go for the win early, which is almost always a bad idea. Plus, I have played the other game I played of this exact same thing happened during the Carnatic War, except it happened to the British. And the French wiped them from India, and they actually came back during the during the 7 Years' War. I think the Third Carnatic War ended up taking it back, or they did that during the American War of Independence. I don't remember, but either way, it was a lot of fun to get to see this will provide you a very good example of what happens. Say you can't give up the victory points. Let's say it was flipped, and the French were down like at 5 victory points, which is close to a British victory. They're obviously not going to give up 3 to keep that. So this will give you an opportunity to see what that looks like, because it's actually very difficult but very interesting to see how a power can keep a foothold in a region despite not having any territory. So that'll be fun. But moving on to this turn, we have up in the North Atlantic or North America section, we have a 1 victory point award with a treaty point, which will be pro-British almost certainly. The French are going to try. We'll get back to that in a second. The Caribbean is a 1 victory point, and that's going to be very pro-French. And once again, we'll get back to that in a minute because I have more to say about it. 1 victory point and a treaty point in India, which is right about split, but the French, of course, don't have a foothold, so that's going to be very highly contested. And then Europe is the 3 victory point marker with the 2 more than needed. I'm just going to do a quick count here. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, I think, for the French, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, so that alone, just the award marker there, plus the prestige spaces would be enough, which they lead in currently, that would give them enough to win, just off of Europe alone. Now, of course, they're going to have some setbacks in other places, but that's enough to do it. For the global demands, both sides had what they wanted, but they didn't get necessarily all of them. So furs is the first interesting one. So that just is going to make North America all the more important, because the French have kind of taken a loss in that area, especially with their fort in the Champlain Valley going down. So they're going to do their best to win that one back, and that's going to be a tall order because some of the fort placement there. The other is tobacco down in the Caribbean, which is much more favorable for them. They pretty much they're going to have a monopoly on tobacco pretty much. So that they're happy about that. The British are not, but they have a secret weapon perhaps. And then cotton, of course, would be naturally pretty well split, but the loss of the French in Pondicherry, they are going to be a little more difficult. So we'll see how that goes. Let's get on to the cards now as far as the hands for either side. So the French have the Bengal famine, which will help them in India. Mercantilism, the bonus on this one for Hyder Ali, which is another India space, which is nice because that's why they went with this, because they thought they would have a turn spent mostly in India. And then the Austro-Spanish rivalry, which allows them to unflag one of the Dutch Republic spaces, which is very pro-British. And then also the bonus gets them some points in India. So that's a really India strong hand, which the French are going to try and make this turn all about India and focus everything there, because the British really can't afford to let them get a foothold in. What they'll have to do is put a squadron in the Malabar coast and on the Hooghly River. So there are not very many military tiles. Also, I made some mistakes on minor actions, diplomatic and military, so thank you to the people who commented them. I cannot remove squadrons by minor military. It's somebody on here, Kurgan Ramirez, a couple of the people had commented as some corrections, so I'll make sure not to do that again. But the way the tiles have worked out are going to make that important. But for the British, they have a very interesting hand. War of the Polish Succession, finance, and this is going to give them some treaty points and a shift to Russia, which will be important for that prestige space award, because they're going to need to get that back. The Kohung system, which allows them to draw a new global demand, which I'm almost certain they're going to use to replace tobacco, because almost everything else favors them. They would love to get spice. They would really love to get fish, and the sugar probably wouldn't be good. Sugar is what they don't want, but getting rid of tobacco, is interesting. And then tax reform, which allows them to reduce their debt, which they have been stuck with in the French, and they just haven't been able to use that. So the advantage tiles are also going to be big because India is where most of them have been claimed. So last thing, I know this has taken a while, but it's actually been a while since I filmed any of this. I haven't filmed one in at least a month or two. I recorded two close together and then posted them further apart. So it's, for me, this is more for me than for you guys, but if you enjoy it, that's awesome. So the investment tiles, tons of diplomatic. I mean, a 4, a 4, a 4, 2 3s, and a 2. Only one major military action, only 2 major economic actions. Plenty of minor economic, and a couple, the rest of them are made up of military. But once again, you're limited in some of these minor actions, which I kind of messed up on in the last video. So I'm going to make sure, I'm going to reread over that just to make sure I'm not doing that again. But, that major military action, I can almost guarantee will be picked up by the French right off the bat to get that British fleet squadron out of the Hooghly River, because they need that. Especially with a Carnatic War coming up, they could flip things, but that one's going to be big, getting out of there. And so, anyways, the French are going to go first. They're going to keep the initiative. They really want to put their foot down here, and I think that the 7 Years' War could really decide this. The victory points given out at the end here are going to be big, but that 7 Years' War is going to be big as well. So this is a big turn for both of these sides. Let's hop in. So the French did grab that 3 major military, 2 minor economic, because that is the only way that you can remove squadrons. So that is important, and they can play event card with that as well. And since there aren't a whole lot, and they want to get this in, they're going to play Hyder Ali, which says take control of one local alliance space or place 2 conflict markers in unprotected spaces in India. And so the local alliance thing is kind of tempting just to grab Mysore from them. But I'm thinking about, sorry, I got ahead of myself before I started filming, placing a conflict marker to hem them in, but I don't think it's actually going to work. So they're going to grab this one here. But the more important part is the bonus, which says 2 economic points in India, which we'll get to in just a second. So with the 3 military, they're going to displace this British squadron. So that costs 3. Then, as you can see, treaty points, they're going to spend 1 to move the other squadron they have to the Malabar coast. Now that completely secures their foothold back in India. Because these are basically serve the same as territories. You can build from there. So they cannot be removed now because there are no more major military actions. And then they have 2 economic points plus the 2 economic points from that card. They're going to supplement one of those, the treaty point, to remove this British market in Calicut, because otherwise they would have the British in behind the lines that they're trying to operate in. And then they have 2 more, which they can, if they want, placed there. They'll have to supplement it with a treaty point, which they don't want to do, but there's nothing else that they can do with that. Everywhere else is isolated or something. I don't think they can place here because this market was isolated. So now the situation in India looks much different because with this foothold, the war is going to come up. That looks pretty nice. The British can hop in here and cut off the French from those cotton markets and down here. Just go there and there. But that's the only way they're going to be able to stop them. Plus, the local alliances break the way of the French. So, starting off, big swing in India. And like I said, they want to make this about India. This turn wants to be consumed here so that the other markets are kind of forgotten about and the French can pick off 1 or 2 of those, or at least keep it small enough to where that 7 Years' War and the European theater can really get them to win. So the British grab the 2 diplomatic, 2 economic with a event and a military upgrade, which they will do the upgrade off screen as always. And they're going to play, I pronounced it wrong earlier, I think, the Kohong system, which they do not have the bonus for actually, which is my bad, but it's not a big deal because they want to go ahead and get one of these global demands out of the way. And they're going to get rid of tobacco because tobacco is pretty heavily skewed to the French, and they do not want to have to fight that battle as well. So they're kind of hoping spice would be interesting, though not necessarily good. It would actually probably be bad. Sugar would also be bad, or equally as bad as tobacco. They really just want it to be fish. If it's fish, they're in business, and if it's not fish, they're not really any worse than they were. And it's sugar, so not any better than tobacco, pretty much exactly the same. But it was a 33% chance, so might as well take that. But I'll get to the sugar in a minute because I'm going to have to change what I want to do. So they may or may not play there. But the 2 economic, for sure, is going to go into placing a marker here to keep the French from grabbing that other cotton market. And then they have a 2 diplomatic, which they were going to use in India to remove one of those spaces, but I'm actually thinking that they might do that over in the Caribbean now, because they are going to have to fight in this area, so that one's a bit tempting. But also they've got an eye on Europe as well. They know they're going to get Russia because they have a card for it, I think. I'll make sure they can play that card. They actually can't. So those diplomatic points are going to have to go somewhere. So I think that they're going to go ahead and drop these over on the Buccaneers and grab the Caribbean. And as you can see, sugar is no better, because the Spanish still have, by the way, this is supposed to have a British piece, but the Spanish have Cuba, and then the French have closed off the British down here. So right now they don't hold any besides Pensacola, but they are isolated there, so the French can pick it off. So anyways, not exactly what they wanted to happen. They had a good move if it was a different market and if they had that bonus, but unfortunately they didn't. So not quite what they wanted, but over to the French. So I just realized that what the French did with this Hyder Ali card was actually not allowed, because you have to do this on here before you do anything else. So they couldn't wait and then take the space. So I just unplayed the card, basically removed the marker from the local alliance, and then just removed the British flag. I didn't retake it, and which gave them back 1 treaty point. So I just basically undid that, is all I did, because that was an illegal play. So the French, for their second one, are going to grab this 2 major economic, 2 minor military, with a event and an upgrade, which I will do off screen. And they're going to play Bengal famine economic card, place up to 2 conflict markers in market or political spaces in India. And they're going to place them here and here. And the objective of this, you will soon see. So the 2 major economic, they're going to use to remove from here. And then the 2 military, they're going to use to purchase a bonus war tile. But obviously, placing these conflict markers means that they won't be able to hop. They'll have to make it expensive to hop into these 2 spaces. But they're hoping to get, their economic one on their next turn and grab one of those. But mostly just meant to slow the progress of the British. But once again, they're going to get a bonus war tile and a war tile upgrade, which the bonus war tile is definitely going to go in Prussia's war. I can go ahead and tell you that, because they really would like to pick up some of the victory points there. So not much on that one, but now over to the British. The British, for their second action, are going to grab the last non-diplomatic major action tile, or investment tile. They're going to get the 2 economic and the 2 diplomatic with an event and an upgrade. The event they're going to play is tax reform, which they do have the bonus on, which lets them move their debt down by 1, 2, 3. 3 debt reduction, which is nice. And then they have 2 economic, 2 military. Now they wanted to do one of these, obviously, but they've been hampered by this conflict marker. They can still go from here, obviously, though, so they're going to spend that 2 to remove this French market, which they couldn't have taken this space anyways because it was isolated, but this just makes the journey a little bit longer for the French to make. that would have opened up possibility of 3 markets. So there was no more. If they wanted to get the last economic action, they had to forego getting a military. So they couldn't actually do anything about the conflict markers. Now with the 2 diplomatic, they're going to come up here to Europe, and they're going to drop it in Austria, which is a prestige space. They only have 2, so they're going to spend 1 treaty point to flag it. But so that's a prestige point. That's nice, and it's a space which they don't have a lot of. But they really got it because of this advantage tile, which says Prussia, German states, 1 total diplomatic to unflag. Silesia negotiations. So that is going to be used as a way to target those Prussia spaces up there and really wipe the French from that area, because that Baltic trade tile is just deadly. 2 debt reduction every single turn. So getting that out of the way, plus the spaces in there, will be big. So that's probably the best way that could be used for the British. Once again, the focus still has been on India, which is what the French wanted. So we'll see if they can continue to do that. French action round 3. 3 major diplomatic, 2 minor economic with the event. There's only 2 events left. This one they just took, so that leaves 1 for the British. The French, having seen that, decided to go ahead and hop on. They didn't really want to take this investment tile. They wanted to take another one. But having seen that the British had the possibility of, taking one, they went ahead and did it now just to get it out of the way. So they're going to do Austro-Spanish rivalry, which they do have the bonus for, which says unflag a space in the Dutch Republic, and then 2 or 2 in India. So they're going to flag this market here and move this treaty point down to 0 to do so. And then they're going to unflag in Europe one of those Dutch spaces. And they're going to unflag this one because it's more expensive. So that's done for the card. Then they're going to use this advantage tile, which is Spain, Austria, 1 total diplomatic to unflag. So they have 3 points. They're going to use 1 total to unflag this British space there and get Silesia negotiations back on the board, because they do not like that. It's going to leave them with 2 diplomatic, which then they are then going to use to unflag this Dutch space. And they could, if they wanted, spend some debt, but they're not going to yet. They did the Baltic trade to get their debt down by 2. They could spend those 2 to hop right back on the Dutch space, which is kind of tempting, just because I don't know when else they're going to use it, but they'll save it just in case, because there may be a more dire situation. So anyways, that's the diplomatic. Now onto the economic, which is going to shift out to the Americas. And they have 2 economic points. This is why they didn't want to do that, because they're going to spend 1 debt to remove that British space, that fur market there, which will cost them 1 debt. Now for the British, they'll have to decide whether or not they want to take the last event or the last economic, because if you take a look here, we have 1 more economic, the rest are all diplomatic, military, and 1 more event. So that's going to be an interesting decision, because obviously after that decision is made, all of the economics moves will have been made. And it's going to be a military slugfest. So, interesting decisions to be made by the British. So after much deliberation, the British have decided to forego the event because they don't have a card they can play, and they're hoping that the event won't hurt them. So they're going to grab that economic. Now, to do the military, the well, let's do the economic first because that'll be a little bit simpler. So they have a 2. They're going to spend 1 treaty point to flag back that fur market. Then they have a 4 diplomatic. They're going to use 2 to grab this Algonquin space, the Iroquois space. And they'll get Iroquois raids, which is nice. And then they're going to use 2 more to remove this French flag from the Marathas. They have to put back raids and incursions. And so that's their 4. Then they're going to spend 2 more to get their debt up to 9 to put a marker in the Dutch alliance space, because that'll help them out with the war, the Prussia's war. And there's going to be enough to maybe do some more in Europe, but they definitely wanted to get ahead of that. And I think that they're good on investment tiles or anything, but they're going to try and just really throw a wrench in what the French can do, a wrench for the French with these conflict markers, and just really mess with them because they really can't do much else. They really shouldn't have picked up this Pirate Havens one. They should have used that to get the Algonquins or Nizam or something like that, or remove the Marathas earlier. But anyways, they're going to use those at a later date to give the French no time to respond. So they do have one more action, the French, and we'll see if they use it for that event. So they are going to grab an investment tile with 3 diplomatic, 2 military, and the event. They're going to play Hyder Ali, this time hopefully correctly, and they're going to do take control of 1 local alliance space, and they will get the 2 in India. So the local alliance space that they're going to take is the Marathas, because it's the best of the 3. And put that back in there. It doesn't really matter because they can't use it this turn, but they also can't place conflict markers anywhere else in India, so that's not great. But they will get the 2 economic points, which they wouldn't have otherwise gotten. And I dropped the marker, but they're going to put it down here in Tiruchirappalli, perhaps. Wrong side, but they're going to put it there in hopes that next turn they get spice, or that if cotton comes back up, that they'll be ready to fight that out with the British. So with that, they have the 2 military minor, 3 diplomatic major action. So for the military, I actually don't know what they're going to do with that, because they don't have, they might get another bonus war tile, because I don't see much else that's very useful. So they're going to grab a war tile, and I'll do that after I get off camera. The 3 diplomatic will definitely go towards placing a marker in that Dutch space, because that's useful. And they have 1 more debt, which won't really do anything because nothing costs 1 really. And they can place more conflict markers, which they're not going to do. They can unflag, so their investment tiles aren't very worth it, and neither are their cards really. So the French are tapped out, they're done. And now it'll be the British with one last opportunity to throw a wrench to the French. All right, so the British grabbed the 4 diplomatic, 2 military, which were the only 2 tiles left. So there really wasn't much of a choice. And they're going to use those 4 diplomatic. 3 are going to be used to flag Russia because they help in a war and or a prestige space. So it's going to leave them with 1. They're going to use their debt to get another point for diplomatic, and they're going to remove this from Spain. And then that's going to do it for their diplomatic. Then they're going to get the 2 military, which this is a bit of a waste. But they're going to use it to put it on the Balearic coast, because that will help them in both the Atlantic dominance in the 7 Years' War and the prestige spaces. So that's a double whammy for the British. Very useful. And now they have their tiles that they can unload, and so they're going to exhaust all the ones with the conflict markers on them. They have 3. 1, 2, 3. And they can place 1 in a Carnatic Coast market. And they can do that here. It's the best place to do it. They can do 1 in a fur market, which they're already going to win, but can't hurt. Do it there. And then they get 1 in, I think you can only use 2 a turn. I'm pretty sure. So what will be better? Doesn't really matter. They're both equally the same. They do want to do 1 out here. So they'll balance. I'm pretty sure you can only use 2 tiles per like action round. You can't just unload all of them at the same time. I'm fairly certain. So that will do it for all of this. Now we can go ahead and do the award. So let's start off with the award in North America. So the British have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The French, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Not even close. Victory point for the British and a treaty point. Caribbean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the British, and a lot more for the French. So they're going to get that victory point back. India, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 victory point to the French and a treaty point. Yeah, things went really badly for the British in India. That's pretty much needless to say. But they, the way the tiles came out didn't help them really. That was what did them in. If it hadn't have happened, if there would have been more major military actions, things would look different. So now for the award in Europe. This is the big stuff. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Let me double check. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yep. So they do get enough to move it 1, 2, 3 into the auto win space. Now I don't know if they actually do win yet or if they have to wait until the global demands. So I'm going to check that. Nope, they got to do the global awards as well. And then we'll check. And if the French are winning, then the game is over before we actually get to the 7 Years' War. So cotton. Cotton actually is going to go the way of the French, which is not good. That's going to be 2 victory points and a treaty point. So they're at 32. Furs are going to go with the British, which is 2. So we're back to 30. And then sugar, which is going to do in the British, because the French are going to win it. That's going to get them 3 victory points, which is 33, which is more than enough for the auto win. So, not what I was expecting to get it halfway through, and especially not after India fell to the British. But that was just the way the tiles came out on that one were brutal. Absolutely brutal. And it's a little bit disappointing because I really want to keep going in this game. I don't want to stop after 2 wars. So, if they would have used those 3 victory points, they still would have been at 30. And they would have had one of these. If they would have used 2, they would be at 27. Now, of course, things would have looked a little different because the game would have been played differently. But I really don't want to stop here because we still haven't even gotten to the revolution phase. And this is such a great game. So I'm going to brainstorm on this and figure out. I mean, of course, we can just say they didn't win and just move their victory points down to 29 and move on with our lives. But I'm going to see if there's a way that we can logically do this because I want to try and keep the spirit of it and not just blatantly cheat. I like to cheat when I don't know what I'm doing, like when I don't know that I'm cheating. But obviously, I don't want to do it blatantly because they're at 33 victory points. And it's just, I didn't even do the award for the prestige spaces, but it tied, by the way. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so prestige is tied, nothing happens. But the fact that the Europe thing, and then if fish would have came up, things would have been a little bit different. They would still be going on. So I don't know, I'm going to try and figure something out to keep this game going because I really want it to. All right, so I gave it some thought, and there's only 2 ways that I see without blatantly cheating. Which, might just, I don't know. But anyways, the 2 ways that I can see doing this that makes sense-ish would either be make the French take back those 2 spaces, spend 3 for one, 5 for the other, that's 8. That would put them on 25 victory points at the end of the turn. Which is a bit extreme because the whole turn centered around India and the French not having their territories there anymore. So I don't really like that one. The other one would be to say that whenever they redrew the global demand, that instead of drawing sugar, they drew fish. That would put the final victory points on 28, which no one actually played anything. Nobody played any cards in the Caribbean besides taking the Buccaneers. And, would anyone have done something different if it was fish? Who knows? But I think it's less likely someone would have done anything with the fish than it is with India. So I think that it would be less detrimental to the board state to change that global demand from sugar to fish. Now, somebody may be really upset by this, but this is to give you an experience of what's going on and to show you this game. So I would never do this if I was playing by myself. I would just end the game and start over because obviously I got to a point where one side was so ahead. I mean, the French are just dominant in Europe and the Caribbean. So obviously I would just restart. But for the purpose of showing you this game, I've put this much into it at this point that I don't want to end it at such an anticlimactic point when there's a pretty good chance that, honestly, the French are just going to win the 7 Years' War and it'll all be over anyways. But I think I'm going to just replace the global demand from sugar to fish. Whenever they redrew fish, which sets the victory points up at 28 rather than 33. Which is what it would have been if we would have left it as sugar. That way we can continue on at least to the 7 Years' War. And if the French hold on after the end of the 7 Years' War, then I'll end it. And just say it was too much to do. So we'll leave it to the 7 Years' War. That way at least you can see another war and a way things work a little bit differently in this one. So I apologize if that upsets anybody, but I think you all understand that this is for you guys and not for the purity of it, because we know obviously this is not an opposed game and this would not happen normally. But I'm simply doing this to show you the game. So it's an extraordinary circumstance, but I won't be doing it or making a habit of it. So let's go ahead and hop into the 7 Years' War. Okay, so the 7 Years' War, we're going to start off with the Atlantic dominance, which is just going to be Europe, and really the Europe is kind of extrapolated because the bonus strength actually only comes from squadrons. So let's go ahead and flip these guys over. So we have a +1 for the French, +1 for the British. And the British also have a squadron in Europe, which will give them a +1, which brings them up to a 2 total. So nobody actually gets the margin of victory has to be 2. And the British didn't place their squadron in the Caribbean or the North Atlantic, or the Atlantic Ocean in North America, because they thought they could get this bonus. The bonus here just basically states that you get a tile that'll go into the French and Indian War. So this stays the same. Nothing happens. We go to the Carnatic War. Third Carnatic War, +2 for the French, +2 for the British. Same again. So this one's in India, and you get bonuses for conflict markers, forts, and squadrons. So I've had somebody ask to show these. Oof. Loosen that up. So we're going to get conflict markers, forts, and squadrons. So the French have 2. I'll start off with. There's a squadron. 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 total for the French. The British have 2 to start with and have a fort and a conflict marker. So that's going to be 2 + 2 is 4. So back down. And we can take a look at the margin of victory here, which is going to be 2. And that's a conquest point for the French. The loser gets a treaty point. So now the French have to decide where they want that conquest point to go. Kind of a tough one. They could go with the Hooghly River, or I mean, they could take any of them. You know, they could take this one if they want. I kind of like the idea of retaking this. None of them are great. They're all, the way they work is they're all kind of odd, but they could isolate the British up here if they remove this one. This one's already kind of on its own, but it's more of a threat. I think they're just going to grab this one back. Rather than be offensive, they're just going to grab that one. So now down to the French and Indian War, which is a big one, and where the French could possibly win if it really goes their way. Prussia is more likely. So both sides really pumped a lot in here. So they can remove a squadron or damage a fort. I don't know if this is before or after you get to do this. So let me double check that, because obviously that's important. Yep, so it does happen before. So they're going to damage the British fort in Ohio Forks. So that will not count. So they're going to have a total of 4, and they're going to have a total of 4 to start off with. And so we will add in Spain, which each have 1 in Spain. So they're going to get a +1 each, that's 5. Conflict markers, that's going to be +1 for the British, up to 6, because they have 1 and over there. And each side has 1 here. And then we have forts. That's going to be a +1 to the British only. So that's going to be 7, because the French is damaged and the other British one is damaged. And then squadrons, which neither have any of those. So it's going to be 7 to 5, which is a margin of 2. No victory points get out, but it is a conquest point for the British, which is good. And they're going to get a treaty point for the French. Up to 3, and they're going to unflag 1 North American market. Let's take look up here. So I say they unflag. Let's go with this one. Yeah, we'll go with that one. And their conquest point they can use on the Hudson Bay, San Augustine, Acadia, Asiento. I know they can't use it on that one. Minorca and Gibraltar. And then these two as well, which someone cleared up for me as well. So Quebec and Montreal is a big one, obviously, which I think they're going to take, just because that kind of feels right, because of the realisticness, if that's even how it should be said, of the 7 Years' War. Now, obviously, this wasn't quite as detrimental, because they also would have taken Acadia, but... And now the one that could really decide things. So, this one is going to catch the British out because they don't have any debt to give. So they're going to go up to 29 victory points. So they're both at 1. And you're going to add in a lot. So I'll point them out on the board and add up the numbers. So Austria, 2 spaces. That's going to be 3 for the French. Sorry. And Bavaria, that's 4 for the French. 5 for the French for Denmark, Norway. 2 for the British because of the Dutch. German states, that's 2. I'm just going to put them up to 4. Prussia, 1 each. 6 and 5. Russia and Sweden are the last 2, which means the British hop over the French and have 7 to the French 6. And that's very important because the winner on that margin gets 2 victory points. So if they had not have done that, they would have absolutely lost, and that's going to push this down to 27. So the British barely hold on, but overall, it's successful. The only thing they give up is, it could have been better for them, I think is really just the way to put it. There was a couple of places they thought that they, were going to just have better things than what the French had. So at the end of the 7 Years' War, going into the Revolution era, this is what the board looks like. Still French dominance in Europe and in the Caribbean. The British holding on strongly in North America, and it is a dead heat mostly in India, with a slight tip to the French. The overall standings as far as the victory points are obviously very pro-French, and this is kind of how it was in the last game I played. The British just couldn't get the marker victory points off that last row down there. They just couldn't do it, and then final scoring came and they still lost by a good bit. So that's going to end it for this episode. I think I'm going to do turn 5, the American War of Independence, and turn 6 in the final episode. So I'm going to upload this one, and hopefully I didn't make too many mistakes. And like I said, I made obviously a very large alteration because of the game having otherwise been over by now. But like I said, there's still plenty more to play, and I want to be able to play it and show you guys. So hope you enjoyed. Please comment anything that I've done wrong, and we'll see you next episode.